This is unbelievable. The Mouth of the South, Jimmy Hart, WWE Hall of Famer. Here I'm waiting for Antoine to get here. More to life. I cannot believe this. You know, look at what I hope I don't get wet today in the rain here coming up here. We're at Hogan's Beach. We got a big shoot going on with him. My friend P.I. Paulie's going to be here for this. Who knows who might drop by to say hello to us. But that's how I'm out here now. I'm looking at all the bad weather coming in over here. I hope the sun comes out later on today. Woo! Man, it's getting chilly out here. Oh, Antoine! There you are, Antoine! Antoine!
Hello guys, thank you for tuning in to this special YouTube edition, special interview. We have a special guest here. It's very great when you get a chance to meet some of your greatest inspirations, people you look up to, people you guys might look up to as well. I thank you guys for tuning in. We're talking to right now the 2005 WWE Hall of Famer, one of the greatest managers of all time. I would like to introduce to you my friend, Jimmy Hart. How you doing, man?
Woo! You know what, Antoine? Thank you for more to life coming out today to Hogan's Beach. And it's a little cloudy today now, but you can hear the thumping in the background. We got the music on. You know, later on this afternoon when the sun comes out, we'll probably have anywhere from 15 to 2,000 people here playing volleyball, riding the sharks through over here, and just having a great time.
Thank you, man. Thank you. Thank you very much for coming out here and being able to do this, man. We're at Hogan's Beach, a wonderful, wonderful place. Lovely place out here. If you want to come out here, play volleyball, you can get some drinks. You can look at some of the memorabilia, meet the legendary Jimmy Hart. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to start in the timeline and start from the very beginning. Let's get into this. You know, man, I heard that you was from Mississippi, man.
I was born in Jackson, Mississippi. Ted DiBiase lives there now, so that's certainly the $1 million man who I used to manage at one time. But, you know, I was born in Jackson, Mississippi, and I lived there with my mom for about 4 or 5 years. And then all of a sudden we moved to Memphis, Tennessee, and the rest is history.
So how was some of your childhood growing up? Or what's some of the memories that you have?
Well, you know, it was kind of great in Jackson and everything else. I hardly remember a lot about that. You know, it's hard to, as you get older, you forget a lot of things.
I understand.
But, you know, going to Memphis was such a thrill for me because, you know, in Memphis, Tennessee, my mother always wanted me to sing in the choir, which I did. So every Sunday, I had to go to church every Sunday, but I'm glad she made me do it, really. But so I started doing the choir thing there, and then all of a sudden, she would always enter me in these crazy contests. And I remember one contest we had down there as I got a little bit older. I think I was about 12 back then. But a guy called Red Foley came to town with the Ozark Jubilee back then. It's probably before your time. And what made that show so special when I was singing 16 tons on that show, that in the back there was a young man sitting by the piano playing on the piano, and they introduced my mother to him, and she introduced me to him. It was Elvis Presley. And Elvis Presley, he told my mother, he goes, you know, I got a pair of cufflinks like those earrings. So my mother had these big earrings, so I remember that, and I thought, man, they had to be big cufflinks. But I'm so glad I was able to do the music, and my mother kind of made me do it, which, you know, led on, we'll talk about later, I guess, to the Gentries.
Right, so let's lead into the Gentries. How did that whole formation of the band come together? What was like you and the guys was just talking when you guys go to high school together? How did that formation of the band come together?
Well, we were in Federal High School in Memphis, Tennessee, and all of a sudden Larry Raspberry came to me and goes, Jimmy, I'm putting a band together, and he said, you know what, we know that you sing, and if you would like to be a part of it, we'd like for you to audition. Well, I went over and auditioned in the back of a garage, and he goes, you're hired. So they were kind of putting everything together back then, and at that particular time, I was playing football at Federal High School. I was the wingback at Federal, 7th in the city, by the way, in pass receiving. And I've got the records to prove it. A lot of people say if Jimmy Hart's lips are moving, he's lying, but I'm telling you the truth, baby. But and so I was playing football, and so I kind of had to make a choice between the band or football. So I played my sophomore and junior year. I didn't play my senior year. So I did the band with Larry and them, which led to great things for us. You know, as you know, we had a $1 million record called Keep On Dancing, and, which came later on, of course. But we used to play all the T. Walker Lewis YMCA's and all the little sock hops around town. And it was a time when the Beatles were really popular too, and all the British groups. So we kind of grew our hair a little bit like the Beatles, as much as our principal at the school would let us do at the time. And all of a sudden, we met a guy by the name of George Klein. Now, George Klein was Elvis Presley's best friend when they went to Humes High School back in the day. And that was kind of a crazy situation. But George got us an audition with a guy named Chips Moman, who produced some records back in the day. So Chips was putting together a new record company called American Recording Studios and American Record Label. So we went over and cut this song for him. The next thing you know, we're on the charts and flying around the country everywhere and doing shows with the Beach Boys and Sonny and Cher and Dick Clark. We did American Bandstand, Hullabaloo, Shindig, and so many of those shows. So it's been a crazy career.
Wow. You know, I'm thinking to myself, I'm a musician myself, and I totally understand how it is to be a musician and to be with a bunch of guys and you're making great music and you're enjoying that experience. What is your most memorable experience about being with the guys, whether you was on tour, on the road?
Well, I remember one time we were in, matter of fact, we were going through Mississippi, and it was like a weekend thing. You know, we could only play like on Fridays and Saturdays, you know, but the school, we were still in school. So I remember one night after high school, we packed our big U-Haul trailer up, and I think we were going down to Hart, Mississippi. And back then, you know, there's those good old redneck boys back then. It ain't like it is now, right? Everything's kind of accepted. But we stopped to get a burger at one of those old burger places. Yeah. And as we walked in, those guys go, "Woohoo! What do we got here? Are these guys boys or girls?" And we're like, "Oh, what are they talking to? They talking to us?" And so, you know, our hair was a little bit long back then, and one of our guys, our saxophone player, Jimmy Johnson, had bought a hamburger. So somehow or another, the guy got it off the counter, and they started pitching around, and all of a sudden, we didn't become that hungry. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so we said, "Hey, you know what? We're not that hungry after all. This guy's got it. Let him pay for it." Boy, we jumped in our big old station wagon. Woohoo! As we went down the road, then we got brave then. Boy, I wish, you know, we should have stopped and fought those guys, but we were about 5 miles away when that happened.
So, after the band experience and, you know, you're making music and you're enjoying your life, how did the transition into wrestling come in? How was that transition?
Well, Jerry the King Lawler and I went to high school together, and Jerry went into wrestling, and he was a great artist, and I went into music. He didn't know I loved wrestling. I didn't know he loved music. So about 4 or 5 years later, you know, he was building his really name in Memphis tremendously, you know, back in the day. And we'd been on tour with Dick Hart, Caravan of Stars, and different groups like that. So I knew about him. He knew about me. So one day I had this phone call from a gentleman that was handling his stuff for him. And they said, "Look, Jerry Lawler wants to cut a wrestling album. Would you like to come over and help him with it and sing backup?" And I said, "I'd love it," because I was a big wrestling fan. Because when I was on the road with Dick Clark, if I was in Florida, I'd get up early on Saturday morning and watch Florida Championship Wrestling. If we were in the Carolinas, I loved Ric Flair, so we'd watch the championship wrestling from the Carolinas at the time. And so I'm just a big fan. And we were in Minnesota. It was, you know, Greg Gagne and all the group of people up there, you know, Mean Gene Oakland. So I said I'd love to do it. I went and sang backup with Lawler. We became great friends, and the next thing you know, we'd known each other for a couple of years, and he said, "You know, Jimmy, you've kind of settled down in the music a little bit, because, you know, once you don't have hits, you know, you kind of start staying home more, but you still need to make money." So we started doing a couple of shows a night at the Ramada Inn on Lamar Avenue. You know, one of those deals. "Hey, the more you drink, the better we sound. Hey, happy birthday to you!" You know, it was kind of like the wedding singer or something, but I guess we were the Ramada Inn singer back then. So we started doing that. Lawler and them, when they would wrestle in Tupelo on Friday nights, him and a guy named Plowboy Frazier, Billy Superstar Dundee, they'd always stop by the Ramada Inn off of Lamar Avenue and come in and do a couple of sets with us, and they'd do TV the next day. So I started doing that with them, and the next thing you know, he goes, "Look, you're home during the week. Why don't you do promotion for us?" So I started doing promotion with him, and the next thing you know, he said, "Jimmy, can you do something with your band?" He said, "I just did a Loser Leave Town with Jimmy Valiant." But he said, "You know, I can't leave, you know, because the people love me, and the territory would collapse if he left. So they wanted to do something where it got Lawler back on TV."
Right.
So I went on TV on that Saturday morning, and Jerry Lawler said, "Look, as you know, last week I lost this Loser Leave Town match, and I'm fixing to go on the road with Jimmy Hart and the Gentries. Well, but Monday night, be my farewell to everybody, and we're going to be on stage, and Jimmy's going to play his hits. I'm going to be singing with him." And so we put that whole thing together. But during the show, we had Jimmy Valiant come out and blast Lawler in the head with a guitar. Well, then the King couldn't leave after that, right? So that just kind of went on and went on. And so one night he came to me and said, "Look, why don't you do a thing where you sit ringside and throw a chain during this particular part of the match?"
Right.
So I did that, and after that I couldn't go back to music. I was hooked with the wrestling. And so I stayed there for 5 years, and then all of a sudden I had a great phone call, and we can talk about that later, from Vince McMahon. But that's how I got from music to wrestling.
Wow. How was your friendship with Mr. Waller to this day? You guys see each other very often? Or?
Well, I got to tell you this. On New Year's Eve, this year at New Year's Eve, we had a big show out here for New Year's Eve. And Jerry had called me and he goes, look, Jimmy, he said, I'm doing Raw on Monday night, but we'd like to fly in, me and my girlfriend, with you and Hulk, to be part of your New Year's Eve party. And so, you know, right here at the Bay Harbor Best Western Hotel, which Hogan's Beach connected to, of course, Lawler flew in. I got him a beautiful room right here overlooking the water. And he got on stage with me and Hulk that night, and he was here for New Year's Eve with us. And so Lawler and I are still very, very tight to this day, because four people have been so instrumental to me in wrestling. My first promoter, Jerry Jarrett. You know, I learned so much from Jerry Jarrett. He was my first promoter. Of course, I wouldn't have known him if it hadn't been for Jerry the King Lawler, because Lawler's the one who gave me my opportunity to get into professional wrestling, which was great. Then, of course, Vince McMahon. You know, Vince McMahon making a magic phone call to get me in New York, which we'll talk about later. So I learned so much from Vince. And then, of course, Hulk Hogan. You know, Hulk and I have been friends ever since the Memphis days, you know, over 32 years, you know. So, you know, it's been a great run for me.
Wow. Tell me a little bit about your first family of wrestling. Tell me about your stable back in the day.
The first family of wrestling. You know, when I started in Memphis, Tennessee, I started out and they gave me a bunch of group of guys, and we kind of misfits, if you can call it that. I had Coco Beware, Norvell Austin, as the PYT Express, the pretty young man.
Coco spit at him, and Steve was coming to take his head off. Ooh, Norvell double-fisted him.
And so I had them. Then I had a guy called the Dream Machine, Troy Graham. We put a mask on him, and we called him the Dream, you know, Dusty Rhodes. The Dream Machine, Dusty Rhodes. You know, and so we called him the Dream Machine, but he was great. He even talked like Dusty, you know. And then I had, oh my God, I had Dutch Mantell.
Yes.
I had Austin Idol. I had, like I said, the Dream Machine. And then I had Handsome Jimmy Valiant. That was my first family. And so we had so many, the Moondogs after that. We had so many of them. And of course, later on, I had the Honky Tonk Man, but back then he was known as the Kisser, like Kiss, Wayne Ferris. So I had Wayne Ferris on that. And it's been so many. So I had Plowboy Frazier before he went to New York.
Right.
I had King Kong Bundy before he went to New York. Also, before he went to New York, I had Jim the Anvil Neidhart, and I managed the Iron Sheik before he went to New York.
Wow!
And the late great Andy Kaufman, of course, too. Just to mention a few, I'm leaving a ton of people out. The Nightmares, you know, Danny Davis, and of course Ken Wayne. But you know, I was so blessed to be part of these guys because I learned so much from them. And Jerry Jarrett, Jerry Lawler put me out there with them because they knew I was like a little firecracker. I loved it so much. I was just full of enthusiasm and excitement. And you know, I've always felt like I learned a lot from Dick Clark too. Dick Clark told me something one time. He said, just remember, in the music business or any kind of business, if you dress like the audience, one day you're going to wind up sitting in the audience. So be colorful, be up-tempo, give the people their money's worth, and they'll always come back to see you.
Wow, great advice. I'm going to take that as well for myself. Wow, great advice. Tell me a little bit about your experience with Andy Kaufman, man. What a legend.
Oh, you know, Andy was great. He came to Memphis, and we were sitting in, before he got down there, I was sitting in Jerry Lawler's kitchen because back then a lot of the booking was done from his kitchen, you know. So we were sitting there, we had a phone call from Bill Apter. Bill Apter is a famous guy back in the day that did all the magazines and stuff. And I guess he'd been in New York and they were trying to get Andy Kaufman in there, but they turned him down, you know. So all of a sudden he makes a phone call to Jerry and we go, are you kidding me? This guy on Taxi? You got to be kidding me. It was like cha-ching, cha-ching, the cash register went off. Bang! So we brought him in and he did all of his little skits, and we started out with him fighting Lawler first. But Lawler put him in the hospital, so he came back and said, I've got to get me a manager. And so it was me. So I started managing Andy, and we had a great run down there. But he loved the wrestling business. He loved Elvis, and he loved the Nature Boy, Buddy Rogers. That's all he talked about back then. So he stayed at my house some. We made a lot of our trips together. He was down there for over a year, off and on. But I managed Andy, and then we turned against each other. And then we tagged up against Lawler together. So back then it was a storyline each week, kind of like a soap opera, you know. So, but Andy was great. He really was.
How enjoyable was he as a person backstage, and how much did he love wrestling?
Well, he was very alone. Like, you know, you'd think he'd be witty and clever with all the guys, but when he got there, we put him in a separate room. He wanted to meditate, and we put him in a room by himself, and I'd come back with him every now and then and check on him, and he stayed that way until it was time to go to the ring.
Right.
And so, you know, before the matches, of course, he would do his little comedy routine out there with the people and get in the match and have all that. So, but he was a lot of fun to be with. I remember a quick story. We went to a restaurant one night, Denny's, by the way, one of my favorite restaurants back in the day, that and the Waffle House. But smothered and covered. But we went to the Waffle House, and this lady goes, Jimmy Hart, can I get your autograph? She got it. She goes, Andy Kaufman, can I get yours? He goes, nope, I'm not signing until after I eat. She goes, okay. So she went to the back. He goes, what does she mean by that? I said, Andy, I'm glad we got something different, because you never know what might be in your food. In the ring, right, you can be as mean to the people as you want, but when you're outside, you better be very humble. He goes, okay, go get her, go get her. I went and got her. He'll sign for you, because he was worried what might happen to his food back then. Not that saying anything would, but you never know. So, but I had a lot of fun with Andy. He was great.
Thank you. That's a great experience, man. I remember watching a lot of things on YouTube about him, and he was very, very, very funny guy. I remember watching a lot of the clips. I was actually doing my research before I came here, watching you two guys work together with Jerry. It was a great experience, man, watching that. It was very entertaining. And let's go into how you got into the WWE. You were introduced to Vince McMahon by Hillbilly Jim, correct?
You know, I was sitting in Memphis, Tennessee, and we just made a run up to Lexington, Kentucky, and when we got all the way up there, about a 15-hour drive because of the weather, snowing, there was a sign on the door and said, wrestling postponed. Well, nobody even called us on that, so we drove all the way back. Took almost a day to get back, and I was sitting at home because it's snowing for 3 or 4 days there, and I got a call from Hillbilly Jim. Now, before that, though, I had been getting phone calls a couple of weeks before that from up in New York, and every time I'd call home, I'd go, hey, any phone calls, and they'd go, well, yeah, Vince McMahon called here, and I went, you gotta be kidding me, Vince McMahon calling me? Oh, please. I thought it was Austin Idol or Jimmy Valiant playing a trick on me, so I didn't call the number. So then another week goes by, I'm up in Evansville, same thing, I called home. Well, you got a call from a guy named George Scott, who just passed away a couple of weeks ago, by the way, but he was a great booker in the day. So he had called, and once again, I didn't call the number again. I thought it was a rib. So I'm sitting at home, and all of a sudden, Hillbilly Jim calls me. I go, Jimmy, Hillbilly Jim. I said, for us, he was called Harley Davidson. So Hillbilly calls me, and he goes, listen, you know, they're starting this WrestleMania in about 3 months, and Vince McMahon saw your tapes. Howard Finkel took them to him, and they want you to give them a call. They might like to use you up here for that. I went, what? So he said, I hope it's not too late. He said, let me call up there. So Hillbilly called up there, and he called back and said, they're going to call you in the next 30 minutes. I went, oh, I couldn't believe it. So in the next 30 minutes, I had a call from WWE, well, WWF back then, which was Vince, and he said, we like your tapes. We'd like you to fly up here. So, buddy, I got on a plane 2 days later, flew up there, signed a deal with him, and like I said, the rest was history.
Wow, is Vince McMahon an intimidating figure when you see him?
He is so unbelievable, and I've learned so much from being up there with him, but to run a company, multi-million-dollar, billion-dollar company really like that is so unbelievable, and the different personalities you've got to handle, and of course, you know, he didn't ask anybody to do anything that he hadn't done. You know, I've seen him been beat up with kendo sticks, and has his head shaved, just to mention a few things, you know. And through the years, he you know, he was a great boss for me. You know what I mean? And he was so kind. They brought me the megaphone back from Japan. Him and George Scott brought a megaphone back to me and said, this is going to be what you can carry the ring. And I said, can I paint it up? Because you can do anything you want to with it, which was awesome. Then my airbrush jackets, he let me airbrush my jackets, and they gave me so many great guys for me to manage too, from Dino Grotto to Adrian Adonis to Earthquake and Typhoon to Terry and Dory Funk, and I had the fabulous Rougeau brothers, and I had Jacques the Mountie too, and Jim Neidhart, Bret Hart, Hulk Hogan, I mean Brutus the Barber Beefcake, the Honky Tonk Man, Greg Valentine. I mean, just it was just such a great run for me, and having all those great people, and of course Erwin R. Shyster, and of course Ted DiBiase, the $1 Million Man.
Wow. And I remember my first recollection of wrestling, as we was talking earlier, was WrestleMania 8. watching you manage Money Incorporated against an Earthquake and Typhoon, 1992. That's my first full pay-per-view I remember watching. I saw matches earlier, but you know, as a little kid, you can't really remember certain things. But that was my first pay-per-view I remember. I remember you coming out. It was such an enjoyable pay-per-view and watching you do your work. What is the art of being a manager?
Whew, I think the first thing is loving to be part of this great business, you know, and I always loved it. So if you can do anything, whether you liked it or not, if it's something you really love, whether you make money at it or not, you're going to stick with it.
Right.
Whether the trips are so long for you that you're miserable, they're not miserable to you. If you're on the road and you don't get a good hot meal, it doesn't really bother you because you're doing and loving what you love to do. And that's been my whole key to this whole thing. The music thing, I love doing the music. So no matter what we went through, the trips in the cars, the long plane rides later on, some of the places we played wasn't the greatest in the world, but they really didn't bother me because once you got ready to go out and entertain the people, it was just a wonderful thing.
Right.
And I look in the mirror every day and go, did I really get paid for doing this my whole life? And that's the thing that I think makes a good manager, or anybody in any kind of work, is enjoying going to work every day. Think about this. When y'all went to my office was whatever building we were in, whether it was Madison Square Garden, the Philadelphia Spectrum, the Horizon in Chicago. You walk into that office and there you got Jake the Snake Roberts sitting over here and with Damien. You got the Honky Tonk Man tuning his guitar. You got Bobby Heenan telling jokes. You got Mr. Fuji playing tricks on everybody. You've got Nikolai Volkov practicing the Russian national anthem. I mean, you got the British Bulldogs over there feeding Matilda. I mean, how could you not like going to work with all these great office employees you've got with you?
Right.
And that's been my whole thing, man. I've loved it my whole life.
Those guys that